I just go for it. It's like when you turn on the search mechanism and you just like you search, you really try to feel it. It's a leap into the void, and it's a good leap into the void. It's terrifying. It's terrifying, but then you just keep doing it because it's terrifying, and it's also addictive, and it's kind of like you want to do it. You want to be able to leap into the void and just kind of survive it somehow. It's a thrill. It's thrilling.
Hey everyone, how's it going? This is Keith Billick, and you're listening to the Picky Fingers Banjo Podcast. It wasn't too long ago, for those of you who have been listening to these shows for a while, that I was congratulating myself on making it to 10 episodes. And now I'm at episode number 25, so I'm at the quarter century mark. And man, it's been a great time, and I hope to keep this going strong for as long as possible. Really the thing that keeps me motivated to keep making these, aside from my own interest in meeting up with these great banjo players and getting to talk some shop and learning how their minds work when they're playing this great music that they do, is your support. And I love getting emails from you, and even if it's just a quick note of, hey Keith, I've been listening to all the episodes, keep up the great work. I get those all the time, and every single one is a really welcome addition to my day. It means a lot that you all reach out to me and offer whatever comments you have. Another great way to support the podcast and to make sure that these keep getting made is to visit the Patreon site and become a Patreon sponsor of the Picky Fingers Banjo Podcast. That website is patreon.com/banjopodcast. So I encourage you to all check that out, and if you're so inclined, become a sponsor of the show, and that of course is also greatly appreciated, especially if maybe, I don't know, if one of you listeners happens to be that 24-year-old guy in Wisconsin who just won $700 million in the lottery, or maybe one of you is that sports gambler who keeps winning on Jeopardy and setting all those records. If one of you is listening, you really need to go to the Patreon page. But in all seriousness, that's a great way to support the show, and I encourage you all to do that. This episode actually has two sponsors from the Patreon page that I need to recognize for their support to the show. The first one is a guy named Johnny Slumpf, and for any of you who maybe have seen a band called Out of Nowhere out in Colorado or the surrounding areas, you've seen Johnny play. Johnny is the banjo player for Out of Nowhere. So any of you who are in that area, go check those guys out. And if you run into Johnny, the banjo player, tell him I said, hey, buy him a drink for me or something. At any rate, thanks, Johnny, for your support. I really appreciate it. The other Patreon supporter of today's show is a fellow Michigander. Yes, that's what we are called, people from Michigan. We are Michiganders. His name is Steve Thayer. Not only is Steve a banjo player, but he's trying his hand at building some banjos. He attended a workshop recently where he got to construct a banjo, so that's pretty cool. When he's not doing that stuff, he's working as a veterinarian up here in Michigan. So Steve, thank you, number one, for keeping all of our beloved pets as safe and healthy and happy as possible. And of course, big thanks as well for supporting the show here. So once again, for any of you who want to be supporters of the podcast, go to patreon.com/banjopodcast, and you can learn all about it there. Anybody who has any other feedback or comments, suggestions, all that business, just email me at pickyfingersbanjopodcast@gmail.com. And other than that, just thanks everyone for listening. I'm really happy you could join me. Today's show is going to be a little bit different. It's a great episode with a very interesting and informative guest. I think you'll really enjoy it. But the main difference here is that for those of you who are regular listeners to the podcast, you might remember a few episodes ago, I interviewed a very talented man named Aaron Jonah Lewis. And there was a bonus episode before that where I let you know that Aaron's a buddy of mine, and he expressed interest in actually conducting some of his own interviews on behalf of the podcast. I thought that was a great idea and gave you all a heads up that might be coming up. Well, this is your first opportunity to hear Aaron at work. So I get a break this episode. You won't be hearing my beautiful voice conversing with these banjo players. It's going to be Aaron taking care of the interviewing duties. The special guest that Aaron is going to interview here is a fellow named Joe Troop. Joe Troop is a fantastic banjo player. His main band is a group called Che Apalache. For anyone who has not heard of them, you should probably check them out. And the spelling of that is Che, C-H-E, and then Apalache, A-P-A-L-A-C-H-E. Joe is currently a resident of Argentina, but he's originally from the States, North Carolina. So he was brought up in a very traditional banjo-y background, but he has since infused his playing with all sorts of other influences. And anybody who knows me personally knows that I'm a sucker for world music and exotic sounding influences. This band is really great. When you hear them, I can honestly say I had never heard any music like that. They really take a lot of American string band tradition and mix it with a lot of those world influences, such as tango, bossa nova, some Mexican folk influences, and then of course American string band influence as well. So I'm really entertained by these guys. Joe is actually the fiddler of that band, but he's a fantastic banjo player, and he gives some really good takes on what it means to be original as a musician and how he approaches that. So I think you're going to really like what he has to say. So yeah, hope you enjoy it. Here it is, Joe Troop interviewed by Aaron Jonah Lewis.
We're here with Joe Troop of Buenos Aires, Argentina. Joe is a multi-instrumentalist, a composer, band leader. He's toured extensively and has lived in many far-flung parts of the world, including Spain and Japan and Argentina for the past 8 years. Mm-hmm. He speaks many languages, and his love of exploring other cultures is a big part of his music, informs his music. And we want to dive in with just the basics first, what people should know about you, if they don't already know about you.
I am from North Carolina, from Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and when I discovered the banjo, it lit a fire in my soul that has not gone out to this day. And it also led me into the whole world of string band music and fiddle, of course, mandolin, guitar, the whole family, Appalachian string band family, which also is debatably not Appalachian, but we won't get into that. So from the age of 14 on, I sort of just got bit by the music listening bug and playing bug, and I got to train with. Given the fact that I'm from North Carolina, I was able to access great teachers from the get-go. So I learned from some of the best players there are out there. I started off with a guy named Gary Chilton, who was a great teacher at a community music school, and then he just sent me to Jody King, who plays banjo with Larry Cordell, and has played with a whole ton of bands, Johnny and Jeanette Williams. And then he sent me to Craig Smith. Craig Smith's a mountain of banjo information, and he's just an amazing player. And then I also got to study with Rex McGee, because he's from King and I'm from Winston. It's about a 15-minute drive. I came across tons of other young musicians who were playing, like you, Aaron, and like Andy Thorne and Ryan Cavanaugh, and just a ton of other people that were as into music as I was, that were gonna go into it from the get-go as like professionals. We all wanted to be musicians. So that's basically it. I started playing banjo when I was 15, and that's pretty much all I did until I was 18, and then I started playing fiddle more seriously, and I kind of cut back on banjo until I was in my mid-20s.
How did you start learning banjo?
I started learning banjo. The reason I started is because I was obsessed with bluegrass when I heard it played live around a campfire at a school retreat. A banjo player and a guitarist, they were like the camp counselors. They took out their instruments and started playing, in the middle of the woods. And everything, I found myself. I love nature. I love hiking. I love music. I just found it all that one night when I was 14 years old. So, my dad went and got a banjo from the pawn shop in Winston-Salem, a cheap Chinese piece of crap, and I just played it until it about broke in half, and then I got a better banjo, and I just kept, that's what I did in high school. 15 to 18, 19 years old, that's all I lived and breathed the banjo and the music of Bela Fleck, but also traditional bluegrass, and just... I gave it hell, as they say.
Just describe, what you were actually doing when you were getting started.
I guess I did a lot. I learned what my teachers taught me. Because, when you're a kid, and they're adults, and you learn what they teach you. So it's kind of fun. I ended up with technical proficiency just because, my ego wasn't in place enough as a child, as a teenager, young teenager, to really be like, are you sure? Or they were just like, do this, and I said, okay, and I did it. So looking back, I just learned a ton of fiddle tunes on banjo, and then I learned to jam, and I would go to jams. I'd drive up to Mount Airy. There was a jam in Winston on Tuesdays. There was a jam in Mount Airy, I think, on Sundays. There were regional fiddle. I started going to fiddlers conventions. That's where I met you here at Galax. I just started, surrounding myself with other people, like-minded people, and I just became part of the tribe, and like we all did, and we just found it, and that's it. I'd run into other players, and just like everyone else, you just get inspired by the fact that, oh my gosh, that guy does that girl does that, whoa, I want to do that. I go and learn the lick, and I got the tab books. I watched the VHS if I had access to them. I believe I did. I don't remember if I really did that. In fact, actually, most of everything I learned was either I didn't even learn that much on tab. It was just straight from the recordings and also from my teachers. Old school. This was before, YouTube and whatnot. So I kind of got the information straight from the source. I don't even think I learned that much off of recordings on banjo when I was a kid. I just learned it straight from, Gary and Jody and Craig and Rex.
So if someone was wanting to learn banjo and there was no one around to learn from, would you say just move to North Carolina? That's banjo country.
Well, I wouldn't say that necessarily, because you can nowadays you can just get on YouTube and find tutorials. Everything changed. It changed the paradigm. That's why these kids play so amazingly well. It's full of the technical advancements in the string band world are kind of you and me were sitting around playing music with a bunch of 15-year-olds today that play way better than us.
Yeah.
In a way, it's like...
But it also, maybe just because we're older and, went through a different process, it makes me want to ask that question. This is kind of an out there philosophical question, but
yeah.
How sheet music posed this aid to learning and recording music that previously didn't exist and was such a help. And then we have recording technology and now videos and internet, and that is all even more helpful, even more important for, preserving these sounds and how things are done. But is there something still that you can't get without being in that place with those people?
Oh, obviously. Yeah, totally. Old school, man. That's how it really is. We all know that. Those of us who are like forest gnomes, and I use that term in a very endearing way. So those of us that are hamsters, we have kind of a philosophical thing going, and it's hard for maybe those of you who are listening. You're like, what? Forest gnomes? Hamsters? There's a musical fellowship that kind of takes you away from the mundane world into this magical unicorn ride through the stratosphere. It doesn't even necessarily involve substances to get you there. You just end up on this beautiful, colorful flight across imagination, and it's just
learning.
It's just beautiful
friendship,
experience.
growing.
I just got the chills thinking about it. It's just
I know.
like,
It's
and we
hard
kind
to
of lose. You
describe.
kind of lose it, but now we're like in our mid 30s, pushing 40, and these kids are there. They're there, and it's like, wow, you're there, man, and it makes me there again.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I'm there again. You know what
Absolutely.
I mean? It's
I should
beautiful.
mention we're here at the Galax Fiddlers Convention.
Oh, we're in our Mecca.
This is it for us. We're not going to go on and on about Galax because it's a very special thing and it deserves its own special episode.
Absolutely.
But that's where we are, and it's a very inspiring place for both of us and for pretty much everyone here. Let's talk a little bit technical. What's your main banjo?
My main instrument?
Yeah, banjo-wise.
Well, okay. Well, so I am playing now. I've had a gold tone for like the past 10 years. I had a Neckville when I was in high school. I also had it during good time. I've never had like a hugely upscale banjo because they're ludicrously expensive, So I just kind of took the low road and did what I have recently gotten a very lightweight banjo made by Jody King, who is my childhood banjo instructor, and he sort of made a banjo out of a carbon fiber tone ring, very light woods. It's a banjo that's great for traveling, taking it apart, getting on airplanes, because I travel with two instruments. I like tour all around the world, and I've got to be able to get my instrument on a plane easily. So that banjo is a great travel banjo. But it's also, a great banjo in its own right. I'm in the market now. I've got Jody himself actually lent me this beautiful Sullivan maple banjo, but I think I'm more fond of mahogany, like the banjo Rex McGee has that I saw last night. That really struck me as the kind of sound I'm looking for. So I might end up with a Davis banjo? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked that banjo last night.
When you're performing with the banjo, what kind of mic or pickup do you use? Do you have a preference? Do you have a regular thing?
The pickup that is in my banjo is really good. I've used it on stage a lot. I have no idea what it's called because I'm not a gear boy. I just should know, but I don't. All I know is it works. When I mic a banjo, I use a shot condenser. It's an Audio-Technica. I don't even know what model. It sits vertically. It sounds really good. Everything I do is basically because Jody set it up. He said, get that mic and use this pickup and use this preamp and blah, 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 blah. And I just do it, but I'm not technically that aware of anything.
Let's go back to, since the gear part isn't going to be a big focus with this interview, where would you suggest that a novice begin?
Banjo playing, three-finger style banjo playing, or any style banjo playing? Three-finger, I would say to start with what I call for my students in Argentina. Let me tune this banjo because I've got the fifth string. I would say start with the essence of the roll. There's a 16-note pattern that is really helpful to get people to understand what the banjo is, what three-finger banjo playing is. So that's the roll. It's a forward through 4, 3, 1, 5, and then it goes back 1, 3, 4, 1. So that's the first half of it. That's a one measure roll because it's 8 notes, and in banjos we're doing constant 8th note flow. The second roll would be 5, 3, 1, 5, 1, 3, 4, 1. So that's the roll. 16 notes. And you cycle it. But on face value, it's cool. It sounds good. It has a lot of directions. You're going forward. You come back. You have a leap from 4 to 1. It's a big interval. And then that thrusts you into a forward roll. And back again. And then you finish up with this other leap. And then you start the whole thing over. That's how I view it. You think directionally as a three-finger banjo. You're going forward, back, leap, forward, and then back, and then leap. And that's the whole roll. And anyway, but But if you think about what the fourth string's doing here, it tells you a lot about counterpoint in bluegrass as a genre, for example. So you have that fourth string, you've got a roll that's 16 notes, and you cycle it endlessly, and you connect with it. You feel it shape, like different contours, and then you incorporate a very simple sliding pattern on the fourth string. Just slide back to the second, and this is already enough to be like a bluegrass. You're playing bluegrass banjo. Climbing up on the mountain, Lord, and what did I see? It's enough to give you the essence of the 5-string banjo. So I start all my students with that roll, and I call it el gran roll, which means the great roll.
That's great. I never encountered starting with 16-note roll. It's always been these shorter.
Oh, of course.
Pieces,
In the first class, I'm like, well, this is forward, 5, 3, 1. This is backwards, reverse roll, 1, 3, 5. There's some rolls that go 4, 2, 3, 1. Where you use your thumb, like thumb, index, thumb, middle, those kind of patterns. And then there's you do thumb, you do 4, 3, 2, 1, 5, and then back through the same pattern. You go thumb, index, thumb, middle, thumb, index, thumb. It's a hard thing to coordinate.
Oh.
You showed them all. I showed them that.
You do that with beginners.
Yeah, and I do that with beginners straight from the get-go. Put their picks on them. I'm like,
index leading.
Yeah, and then I don't incorporate the first class. I never I don't even talk about left hand unless they're gifted. And then some people they get it and they're like, okay, show me more, and I show them more. But for most people, and I've given probably thousands of banjo classes. So I've tried this out, because I was a banjo instructor to make my living for a lot of years. But so it's that works. And then if once you work through those patterns, you show them later in the class, okay, here's your challenge. Try to do this 16-note, the great roll. And then, of course, I always reference that roll, because when you're playing backup in a bluegrass, you're backing up a fiddle, you always go back to that roll. It's the roll everyone uses. I don't know if anyone else has pinpointed it as a roll, but everyone does do it. I just taught so many classes, I think at one moment it dawned on me. I was like, oh, that's the roll everyone uses. I don't remember having learned it myself that way. No one taught it to me. Or maybe they did, and I just forgot. I was so young. So,
what kind of picks do you use?
When I was 15, this guy named Billy Hamilton from Winston-Salem, he just gave me a couple sets of national, silver coated picks, the old school from the 40s. So I've got the real thing. And I've used these picks for, 17 years. Never lost them. Just have always used them. I've had to drive hours to go get them where I forgot them. I have had to do that, but and then on my thumb I use a Dunlop medium gauge calico plastic pick.
And you wear that right on the very tip of your thumb.
And I wear a medium, and it's on the very tip of my thumb. Yeah, I never got into the big fat in the middle of your thumb kind of large pick thing, the Golden Gate style, thicker.
And the finger picks how do you wear them on your finger?
I wear,
past your fingertip?
How would you describe that, actually, if you're looking at it? They're kind of turned upwards. I believe I turned them up.
Yeah, they're turned up a bit, and there's,
pretty close.
Maybe even a 1/4 inch of space between your fingertip and the tip of the...
Yeah, there is. And that's just how I started doing it, and I don't know.
So now let's talk about your style and how you approach the string with your pick. How do you make contact?
I make contact at I cut the angle, it's a 45-degree angle, I guess, because I think the pick surface cuts the string at a 45-degree angle, and then you just roll it off of it. It's I think that's what everyone does, honestly. I just don't know how to articulate this in English. The pick, the left side of the pick cuts the string at a 45-degree angle, like basically coming up towards your face. It's hard to visualize. But that creates that, you have to have that angle to have an attack. If you hit it flush, it's going to sound like crap. So the same thing happens with your thumb. But the angle, that 45-degree angle on the left side of the pick is actually cutting what would be like diagonally towards, you know, like the angle that would cut between where the neck and the resonator come together, like a perfect 45-degree angle out of that crevice. That's the, I mean, that's pretty sure that's what everyone does. I don't like to hit it. Some people cock their thumb back a little bit and have that kind of thing going. And they get the pick on the other side. You know, some people actually play the other side of the pick. I like to play what would be looking down at it, the left side of the pick. But I also bury on the tip. But I'm not comfortable having the whole tip, so if I would ever have to use a new thumb pick, I like to sand them down a little bit and kind of get a kind of a used pick sort of feel.
How would you suggest improving your own timing?
Playing along with recordings or a metronome. Got to do that.
Do you play with a bounce or with straight time?
It depends. Both. You have to play with different kinds of swings. So you've got like straight time. You do the same rhythm with the bounce. Straight. Then with bounce. And those swings are kind of hard. There's a nuance, you know. There's a nuance there that's really important.
Yeah, do you like to play in front of the beat, behind the beat, right on the beat?
Depends. I like to do it all. Yeah. Sometimes I like to hit it real hard. It's playing back. And bluegrass, you know. But then, of course, like if you're like doing a different genre, it's like has nothing to do with the drive. Bluegrass, you could be like, I'll do that again because my seat's moving. Has nothing to do with American swing at all. That's like a tango kind of feel. It's like a, you know, piano approach to banjo, which Bela Fleck pioneered, and now a lot of other people have picked up on. But it sounds really cool. The banjo is so expressive it's like a non-bluegrass instrument too. You know, I feel that.
What kind of strings do you use?
Oh, well, I just use the one. That's the thing. I did not explore gear on either as a fiddle player or as a banjo player. I just ended up. My teachers told me to use the J.D. Crow, the GHS J.D. Crow banjo set, light gauge strings, and I just did it. However, last night while playing Rex's banjo, he uses a thicker gauge string, and I really liked it. So now I'm in the process of deliberation on what am I. I'm actually now at the age of 35, starting to I'm starting to imagine a potential banjo project. And the sound that I want, and I'm exploring that.
You have made recordings with your banjo.
I've made recordings with I guess I did both of my recording. I played with a bassist in Argentina named Diego Sanchez for 7 years, and we did 2 recordings. And on both of those recordings, I play my kind of cheap Chinese entry-level banjo, which sounds good. You know, it doesn't sound like. You know, a lot of people get into banjo that have a lot of money and they get great banjos. Regardless if they know how to play or not, they'll get great banjos. But it's really not the banjo. I would say it's the player. I mean, I've seen tons of people who prove that to me. So, but regardless of what I just said, I think that gear is important, and I'm searching right now to try to. Now that I got a little bit more cash flow, I'm going to try to get a better, get exactly the sound I want. I want a real like mellow sounding banjo for more singer-songwriter oriented stuff. I like to sing and play banjo at the same time. It's kind of like my shtick.
And you're a composer as well.
And I compose.
How do you go about composing?
It just happens accidentally. You know, I'll find something.
Stay open to it.
Stay open to it. Absolutely. Like if I found I found a roll, I found a chord shape. I don't even know what chord that is. So, and then a roll. It sounds beautiful. I don't even know what it is. And then sing on top of it.
Algo pasa entre la gente. ¿Qué pasó? Otra vez estamos mal, vos y yo. Debo perdonar.
Just, you know, like I just find stuff that I think sounds hip and then I stick with it. And then I'll be inspired by, like, one day I wrote, like, you know, I just wrote a tango a few weeks ago. I just sat down and I don't know, it had to come out. I spent all day doing it, just whittled away at it like a carving. And it just flows. It's like a creative process. I don't know how to explain it. It's innate in me.
What was the first time? When did that happen?
When I was like 15, when I was just started playing, I started writing. Like, to me, that's what I am. I don't know. I'm not that great of a tune guy. I end up knowing a lot of tunes just because of, you know, I'm around it. But I'm not, like, I don't approach music that way. Which has caused me a lot of frustration, too, because I almost wish I did sometimes. I'm like, oh my God, I want to learn that song, and that song, and that song, but I just never do it. I just kind of play. I just grab my instruments and I play them like a with abandon. I sort of, you know, I would say, and then and sometimes I just have a party with my instrument by myself, and I don't accomplish anything. I just, you know, kind of like, you know, screw around, just doing weird roll patterns with some stupid pattern and just like have fun with it. I don't know, or like I do my little triplet stuff. I have like some techniques, I guess, that are now like very emblematic of. I'll start whistling with it or something. Just like a pattern through a diatonic, like through the notes of the G chord, but with weird banjo techniques. You know, like just the floppy fingers dancing around. I'm a kind of like an ear-oriented musician, so I don't know what I'm doing half the time, but I listen very intently, and I do know a lot about reading chord charts because I've played jazz as a fiddler, so I know how to make melodies flow within the confines of like a road map. You know, use chords as a road map and then be like, oh yay, there's a note that is a half step from the notes from the third in the previous chord or something, that kind of stuff. You know, I have definitely studied it, but harmonically I'm sort of an idiot. But I end up coming up with, I guess, complex harmonies. Harmonies, that's not even a word. Harmonic progressions, just out of listening, having been exposed to good music, you know.
How do you approach backup on the banjo?
Well, that's interesting because it depends on the genre. Of course, bluegrass is one thing, you know, but when you're backing up like a, you know, there's certain things like you know, like tapping on the four, like that. Like do it kind of like I'm influenced by jazz and South American music, so it's like I guess you could be those are some chords, right? You could give it some sort of groove, like. Then I'll use like a brush with my ring finger because it gives it a cool tune. Then I'll press the head, make a vibrato. It sounds like it's a beautiful sound. Banjo's open to all this stuff. You can do kind of like swishy sounds on the. It's just such like it's so open. You can even like use the girth of your pick.
Yeah, let's keep going. I want to talk some more about What makes your sound, how you describe your style, what makes you sound distinctive, and some of your techniques?
I don't know how distinctive they are, because after looking at like classic banjo picks, it's like obvious conclusions. You know, of course I've got metal finger picks on. I mean, it's just obvious stuff. You know, like you rub the strings across the surface of it, so you're not picking into the string. You're just like rubbing on top of them. But if you're closer to the bridge, the harmonic is produced is higher pitch. And if you're closer to the fretboard or on top of it, it goes changing. And then you kind of get like enjoy that change. And just explore that little change. That's one technique. And then there's like meeting the strings, like not fretting them the whole way. Kind of like Chick Corea does as a pianist. I would think of the left hand of the banjo as possibly being like the felt part of the dampeners on a piano. You can do that, you know. You can make it ring really clear, or you can get it. That's still a sound. It's not like it's not a sound. You can get so far into that nuance, like it's amazing. You could even use your pick to like. There's one song where I'm like, I do, like there's one thing and that sounds like, if you hit it right, sounds like a pedal steel or something, just like flopping the pick right onto the 10th fret, moving it to the 12th fret, but in the context, sounds awesome.
What in your mind constitutes a good player? What do you listen for?
That's the thing, it's so diverse, you know. I think every good musician is inherently just completely head over heels jealous of other people because they do something better than them. They do something, like, I guess my forte is composition, so I write, I can sculpt compositions in a beautiful way, and that's kind of like my forte. And then I guess I can sort of improvise, but then I'll hear like people that are more improvisation-oriented banjo players, and I'm like, God, I wish I could do that. And they do that in bluegrass, but they take it to the it's like a universal approach to bluegrass. You can hear the whole musical universe through bluegrass, through their banjo improvisation. It's like, oh my God, it's a perfect mix of melodic and single string. And it's like, oh my gosh, I wish I could do that. But so there's all kinds of stuff going on in this musical universe, and it's all really inspiring, you know. I mean, what you're doing on classic banjo is really inspiring. What Rex does with classical music, with banjo finger picks tuned in fourths, that's inspiring. What I guess traditional bluegrass players that play exactly like J.D. Crowe played are inspiring because they keep it going. It's like everyone's doing their thing. Let them. I mean, everyone can do whatever they want. What do I look for, though? What do I look for, honestly? Mm-hmm. Creativity or interpretation.
But originality, authenticity.
Because you know that's what I go for. Mm-hmm. Originality, authenticity. I like the creative spirit. I like to hear new compositions or dredging up old compositions. Like I was telling you about that a few days ago. Like I think that interpreting music that's already written by great composers is something that has to be done. You have to show people what's up. Look, this exists. This music existed for banjo. It still exists for banjo. And then like trying to compose new music for banjo, I think is really cool as well. So I guess, but I like to listen for people that are passionate about their playing and that they can move my center. And when someone's passionate about their playing and there's an element of technical proficiency, it inevitably hits you and you're like, wow. And I want to be that person. So I'll go through, like here at Galax, I'll go through the day being like, I want to be that guy. I want to be that girl. I want to be that girl. I want to be that guy. I want to be a girl guy. I want to be an amorphous little pansexual floating thing that kind of glides into the stratosphere of banjo geekdom.
How much of what you do on stage or record is improvised?
Depends on which band I'm playing with. There's some bands that's like all spirit of improvisation. With Che Apalache, there's snippets of improvisation, but most of it's interpretation of the music we've worked out extensively. We are doing our arrangements, and that's what we're going for. Of course, as a vocalist, I'll improvise nuances and everything's sort of improvised, because sometimes your vocal health isn't good enough. Sometimes your thumb hurts. Sometimes you don't want to like go for something that's hard, so you modify it. You know, like musicians have to make these. When it's something you do all the time, you make decisions on the fly. You're like, I don't feel like doing this right now, so I'm going to do it this way. You know what I mean? So I guess in that way it's improvised. But like, I wouldn't say that I'm doing an extremely improvisation-oriented assault on the world at this moment, though I have worked as an improviser more in the past.
How do you improvise?
Poorly. No, I don't know. I improvise. I just go for it. It's like when you turn on search mechanism and you just like you search. You really try to feel it. You really just stretch. You know, it's that X Factor thing. It's hard to like explain. You know what I'm talking about. And if anyone knows what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. When you do search and it goes across well, of course you have practiced for a million hours in your whole life and all these years, and then you did drills, you did the scales, you did the modes, you did chord stuff. You've gone through practice. You've spent your entire life playing music, and then there's a moment where you just like you search, and if the searching goes well, then you found, and it's a beautiful feeling, but it's impossible to put into words.
Well, I think when you first try it out, it's sort of a leap into the void.
It's a leap into the void, and it's a good leap into the void. It's terrifying.
Yeah.
It's terrifying, but then you just keep doing it because it's terrifying, and it's also addictive, and it's kind of like you want to do it. You want to be able to leap into the void and just kind of survive it somehow.
It's a thrill.
It's a thrill. It's thrilling.
Do you surprise yourself when you improvise?
Sometimes, yes. Sometimes when I coast on a spiritual plane above and beyond the world, I just know it's in me still. I do know it's in me because I've done it a million times, but it's not like it's always on.
Do you think ahead, or do you...
Sometimes I think ahead, sometimes I think...
You just let it go blank?
And sometimes I let it go blank. I think it's a mix of anticipation. Sometimes it's there's no intention whatsoever. Sometimes you're just like, you've probably felt that. Like all of a sudden you're just like not even you. It's just happening. It's like effortless.
The music is playing.
It's just playing you. It's weird.
I know, it sounds so cliche, especially if you haven't experienced it.
If you haven't experienced it, there's no way you can know, because the only way to experience it is to be risky in life. And I think a lot of musicians also lead kind of risky lives because they put it out there. They're willing to sacrifice their safety. In a solo or in their lives. I mean, just look at them. Look at some of the best improvisers. They weren't exactly, they weren't accountants that worked at some sort of...
Well, you don't know that.
I don't know that, and I'm sorry if there's any accountants listening. I'm sorry. You can do this too.
What would you suggest for someone wanting to learn how to improvise on the banjo?
To drink some whiskey alone in a room with a candle, maybe smoke a little, joint or something, and just like play a little, play like a kid with abandonment, and just kind of like, I mean, I recommend the kind of stuff that, I do, or I did. Of course, I'm not going to do that on stage on the bandstand. I did that when I was a teenager. I'm going to go for it completely sober, but I mean, maybe use a little bit of alcohol to shut your right brain off and just allow it to like go into the left brain and just sort of look at that wobbly flame on that candle and sort of dance with it with your fingers and explore textures, explore subtleties. Like this note is this note, right? Could this note be? Could this note be? Could this note be? Could this note? I mean, this note, that note can have a million different flavors and textures if you wanted to.
How would you recommend that someone build up their speed?
Practicing extremely slow. Whatever's hard for you, practice it extremely slow, and then you'll be able to do it fast. You'll see. Just trust in that.
Do you have certain right hand rolls that you prefer or that you use more than others?
I guess I do. I've started noticing that. Like, I don't even really know they're... I really like that for some reason.
Can you walk us through that one?
Yeah, I'll just, let's see. So I guess that's I'm on the 9th fret of the 1st string with my pinky. Then I play the 5th string up into the thumb. Then I play middle finger again on the 1st string and index on the 5th fret. Then index in the left hand on the 5th fret. So it's a...
Take us through the right hand alone first.
So that's middle on...
Just play it slow, would you?
I like that cycle. That was a big discovery. So it's just, I mean, it's...
So that's
middle.
That's an asymmetrical...
It's an asymmetrical... It's a 7-note thing that
phrase.
You cycle in 4.
Yeah.
And that helps you just like start feeling polyrhythm because the cycle's odd. It's not like so. I don't even know. I don't even know what I'm going for. So it's like, yeah, just feel 7 or 5.
Low Korean mode?
That was low Korean.
Do you feel like you have tension in your right hand generally, or do you keep it fairly loose?
When I have to play really loud to cut in a jam sometimes, but for the most part I'm really loose, yeah. Because I guess I got trained a lot. So I feel pretty, like, right hand, I have more left hand issues, I suppose.
How do you suggest someone get more volume?
Hit the strings harder. Pretty much. Isn't that what it is?
How do you improve definition and clarity in your playing?
Definition and clarity, I would say, like, again, practicing really slow. Hey, Kenny. We're in Dawn and Kenny's camper here at Galax. How you doing? Hey. Definition and clarity in banjo playing is play slow and don't hit the head of the banjo with your picks. Everyone does that. It's so sloppy. Can't do that. There's so many great players that ruin their sound, and they get into a studio and they're like, you hear that because it's mic'd closely, and also it's just sloppiness. You gotta lift the fingers up a little bit more, or whittle down your thumb pick a little bit more so that it doesn't hit the head of the banjo. That's important.
Who or what were your strongest musical influences when you were learning banjo?
Bela Fleck, and also my banjo teachers, traditional bluegrass banjo teachers, and then the music of Bela Fleck. That's what I was listening to, honestly.
And who do you listen to these days in any kind of music?
Banjo players, you mean? Or
yeah.
It's kind of a shame. I just honestly don't listen to much banjo music whatsoever, except for old time Callhammer that I don't even like. I don't even play that style. It's kind of weird. Or Irish banjo.
What music are you listening to in general?
I'm listening to. What am I listening to? I'm listening to a lot of Latin American music, a lot of music from different parts of the world, a lot of world music in general, Indian music. music from Madagascar, music from North Africa, Morocco, Spanish music, a lot of flamenco. I listen to a lot of gypsy jazz. Adrian Monniard is a guitarist that I'm listening to right now. I listen to Reggie Watts, and I also listen to his philosophy of life. The guy's awesome. I listen to How to Pimp a Butterfly, is an album I've been listening to a ton. And like, oh man, I don't know, just really varied. Sometimes I get in the mood to listen to something quote unquote odd, and I do it, and I like it.
How do you deal with periods of frustration with the instrument, like dry spells?
Stop playing completely. I've done it for years at a time.
Wait for it to call you back?
Wait for it to come back, and it does. And when it does, you just go with it again. It's kind of crazy.
I love that idea.
Yeah, well, banjo is not the instrument that I'm working on. So when I have that happen on fiddle, it's more complicated. I have to just keep playing.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm dealing with at the moment. But I am trying to get a banjo band together. Maybe with you.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Just a few more questions. Have you ever had any pain from playing? And if you have, how have you dealt with it?
I had a little bit of, I guess, pain in the left hand from stretching. It was never bad enough to where I really had to deal with it. I'd just wait a couple days or something, or I'd lay off and then go back to it, or stretch.
How do you tune?
Very carefully. How do I tune? Oh God, tuning is so hard to teach to students. How do you tune? I tune by ear, first of all. I try to get that good balance. And I'm not sure if that's completely calibrated. I definitely don't feel like when I tune with a tuner it sounds good. I tune with the tuner to get it close, to get my tonal center. But then I make adjustments. And if I'm playing an E flat, it's going to be slightly different. If I'm playing, like, if I want this key, whatever it is, don't like the second string, so now that chord sounds better. So I guess the second string's the second string, I'll use it flatter on certain keys.
In order to be able to make it sound good,
yeah,
you have to first know what good sounds like to you.
Exactly. That's well put.
And how do you do that? Listen a lot.
I, at this juncture,
Surround yourself with good music.
Yeah, I know. I have my. I understand what I think is beautiful, and I never have a doubt. So when I'm working in a band context, I'm very often the guy. It's like, I don't like that. Sorry, it doesn't meet my aesthetic criteria. Especially when I'm working with younger or less experienced musicians, I often feel like they're not doing the music justice, and we need to look harder. They'll come up with ideas that I'll shoot down, as people did to me. I think it's a rite of passage. Now, when I'm working with better musicians, I'll be like, I don't like that. And then I'm like, I'll go back and a week later, I'll be like, oh my God, they were right. That's way hip.
What record are you happiest with that you're playing on?
The first album that I did, A Traveler's Sketches, I think is like a concept album that was really from a very... That was my first artistic statement in a way that was real.
I love that record. And where do people find your records?
You can find both A Traveler's Sketches, Cheap Sacred Texts and Microwaves, and Latin Grass, which is with Che Apalache. You can find all three of those albums on my website, joetroop.com, JOETROOP.com.
Last question, and this one could take a minute. What would you say is the future of the banjo?
I'm going to try to make that happen. That's all I have to say.
It's up to all of us.
Yeah, so I'm going to do my part.
Can you describe what you have in mind?
Yes.
Or what you'd like to see?
I want to do my original compositions with a 4-piece band, probably with a bassist and a percussionist that has a light touch, and a soloist instrument, possibly a violin or a saxophone. And I want to make ensemble music that is also poignant, singer-songwriter, intelligent, like not just instrumental compositions, but very carefully selected words that are contemporary and will make people think and also make them cry. And I want to make people, I just want to help facilitate a wide variety of human emotion, and that's what good art does, I think, is it takes you on your own journey. The art is like a vehicle where you get to know different aspects of yourself. In one single listen, you can go from laughing out loud to crying and to being anxious and to being uncertain and to wonder and ponder. But if any artistic statement I could ever make brings people closer to search what is search, then I'll be happy.
We should call it there. Keep an eye out for those guys. They sing really nice. They all play great. Beautiful.
And I don't play banjo in that. My Mexican banjo student does. He kills it.
He's really great.
He's really great.
They play great arrangements. They'll be all over YouTube if you want to look for them. Cheapalache. It's almost like a palindrome. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Picky Fingers Banjo Podcast. That was Joe Troop and guest host Aaron Jonah Lewis. Special thanks once again to Steve Thayer and Johnny Slumph, who were the Patreon supporters of this episode. If you'd like to become a Patreon supporter of the show, go to patreon.com/banjopodcast. If you'd like to contact the show, I can be reached at pickyfingersbanjopodcast@gmail.com. But that does it for this episode. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.